The roast suckling pig hit the white tablecloth presentation table so hard the rosemary sprigs scattered like green knives across silver. And Sienna Russo's knife, a Wisthoff 8-inch she had carried into this kitchen at 14, came down behind it in one clean stroke that split the skin from the spine with a sound like wet paper tearing. The Culinary Institute of America's Grand Ballroom went silent. 200 chefs in pressed whites watched a 23-year-old woman with flour in her hair carve a 30-pound animal in 58 seconds. The head of the school stepped forward with a brass medal on a velvet pillow. Class of 2026, your valedictorian, Sienna Russo. The applause hit like surf. Sienna lifted the medal to her lips, kissed it, thought of her grandmother in Queens watching the live stream. Her phone buzzed in her chef coat. Then again, then 6 times. She answered behind the kitchen door. Her grandmother was crying. "Kara, your uncle. He took it. He took everything. $340,000. The relocation money, the down payment on the new restaurant, gone." Uncle Vincent had emptied the safe at 3 a.m., and the security footage caught him kissing a cocktail waitress on his way out the door. Sienna stood in the loading dock in her chef whites, valedictorian medal cold against her throat, and watched a roach scuttle across the concrete. Behind her, 200 people were toasting her future. Her phone buzzed again. A different number, no name. One message. $20,000 a month. Live-in. Private chef. Manhattan. Discretion required. Reply yes for address. Her thumb hovered over the screen. Sienna typed yes. The black Escalade pulled up to a 4-story townhouse on Sutton Place with windows like dark mirrors and a wrought iron gate that opened before the driver had even reached for a buzzer. Sienna stepped out in her best knife roll and a coat she'd borrowed from her brother's girlfriend, and the first thing she saw was a man in a black overcoat walking out the front door with a single drop of blood drying on his white cuff. He didn't look at her. He got into a second car. The car left. The gate closed behind it. Sienna stood there with her knife roll over her shoulder and her heart doing something complicated in her chest. A woman in a black tailored dress opened the front door. Mid-50s, pearls, eyes like a hawk's. "You're early." "I was told 7 sharp, Sienna says. "Good, we don't waste time in this house." The woman steps aside. "I'm Mrs. Carmela. I run this household. The lady of the house is upstairs. The men are out. Come." The foyer alone was the size of Sienna's whole Queens apartment. Marble, a chandelier that looked like frozen rain, a staircase that curved up into a ceiling painted with cherubs. None of it gaudy, all of it old. Mrs. Carmela stopped at the kitchen doorway, turned, studied Sienna's face the way a sommelier studies a vintage she's not sure of. "Listen to me, girl. You're the cook. You will feed this family. You will keep your eyes down, and you will forget what you saw walking in." Sienna swallowed. "Yes, ma'am. One more thing." Mrs. Carmela's voice dropped. "If you ever see my son angry, don't be in the room." Footsteps came down the stairs behind them. Vivienne Valentini descended the curved staircase in a navy silk blouse and a string of pearls that were older than the building, and her shoes made no sound on the marble at all, which is how Sienna knew this woman had spent 50 years walking in heels, in places where being heard was dangerous. "You must be Sienna." Vivienne's smile was warm, and her eyes were not. "Show me." It wasn't a request for credentials. It was a request for food. Sienna walked into the kitchen. 6-burner La Cornue range, brass fittings, a cold room the size of her childhood bedroom, and opened the fridge. Veal shanks, San Marzanos in a jar with a handwritten label, saffron, a whole sea bream on ice, burrata, a bunch of basil so fresh the leaves were still beaded with water. Sienna set a timer. 1 hour. She broke down the shanks for osso buco. She started a risotto Milanese, stirred with the patience of someone whose grandmother had once smacked her wrist for stirring too fast. She seared the bream skin on with brown butter and lemon. She built a panzanella with the burrata and the basil, and a peach she found in the fruit bowl, sliced so thin it was translucent. 58 minutes. Vivienne sat at the kitchen island. She lifted the fork. She tasted the osso buco. Her eyes closed for 1 full second. She set the fork down. "Where did you learn to make this?" "My grandmother," Sienna says quietly. "She was from Palermo." Vivienne stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned to Mrs. Carmela. "I want her in this kitchen tomorrow morning at 6, and every morning after." The pearls at her throat caught the chandelier light and threw it back like a verdict. The first dawn in the Valentini kitchen broke gold across the copper pots, and Sienna was already 3 eggs into a frittata when the back door slammed open, and a 6'4" 19-year-old in a Boston College hockey hoodie slid across the marble floor in his socks and hit the kitchen island like a freight train of charm. "You must be the new cook," Nico Valentini grinned. "Tell me you make pancakes." "I make whatever you want," Sienna says. "Marry me. I'm working." A second figure came down the stairs more carefully. 22 years old, in silk pajamas, hair in a top knot, sunglasses indoors. Aria Valentini, 3-time Grammy nominee, 8 million Instagram followers. She slid onto a stool, lifted her sunglasses 2 inches, and squinted at Sienna. "Are you a real chef or a Carmela heir?" CIA. "Class of this morning, valedictorian." Aria's eyes opened all the way. "Mom snipped you up?" She turned to Nico. Mom snipped her up. The minute Mom hears about a real one, they vanish from the labor market. Nico shoved an entire frittata wedge into his mouth. "Worth it." Vivienne came in next, took her espresso, kissed both her children on the head, and gave Sienna a small nod that meant you survived the morning. Don Lorenzo did not appear. "He was," Mrs. Carmela murmured, "in the Hamptons." The chair at the head of the table stayed empty. So did one other. "Dante's?" Sienna asks. Aria glances at Nico. Nico stops chewing. The front door opened. The whole room stood up.
The man who walked into the dining room was wearing a charcoal suit that had been cut on him, not for him, and his shoes made the same soundless contact with the marble that his mother's did. And Sienna understood, in the half-second before he looked at her, that this was a household where silence was a discipline taught from birth. Dante Valentini was 31. Tall, cheekbones a sculptor would have cried over, eyes the color of wet slate. He set a leather briefcase on the sideboard, accepted a kiss from his mother, ruffled his sister's hair, slapped his brother on the shoulder, and did not look at Sienna once.
"I have a flight at 9.
You haven't eaten in 14 hours.
I'll eat on the plane."
You'll eat something. Sienna, a sandwich, now. Sienna moved. Sourdough, she'd baked it at 4 a.m. Soft scrambled eggs, finished off heat, folded with chive and a whisper of cream. Speck from the cold room. A smear of fig jam Mrs. Carmela had pulled from the back of the pantry. Salted butter, toasted dark on one side, golden on the other. She wrapped it in parchment and butcher's paper and handed it to him across the kitchen island. For the first time, Dante looked at her. 1 second, 2,
"Thank you."
and his voice was lower than she'd expected and softer at the edges. He turned and walked out. Tomas, the man with the blood on his cuff from yesterday, held the door. In the back of the SUV, Dante unwrapped the sandwich. He took one bite, stopped chewing, stared at the half-eaten bread in his hand, like it had spoken to him in a voice he hadn't heard since childhood. In the driver's seat, Tomas glanced in the rear view and saw his boss's face change.
The midnight rain came down hard on Sutton Place, and a wet, mud-streaked Range Rover rolled up the back drive at 12:40 with a bleeding boxer slung across the back seat, and Nico Valentini stumbled out of the car holding 90 pounds of bulldog like it was an infant, shouting for Sienna.
"He got in a fight with a Doberman. I need food and ice, and I need it 5 minutes ago."
Sienna was already moving. She didn't ask whose dog. She didn't ask whose blood. She iced the wound, called the night vet on Mrs. Carmela's emergency line, and while they waited, she made Nico the late-night meal he had been begging her for since breakfast: smash burger, 2 patties, American cheese, special sauce, the brioche bun toasted in beef fat. By the time the vet arrived, the bulldog was stable, and Nico was on his 3rd burger, and Aria had appeared in slippers and a face mask and was eating bone broth straight from the mug like soup.
Sienna, I have been starving in this house for years. 3 different chefs. None of them cooked like food was love. You cook like food is love.
My grandmother does that.
Your grandmother is a saint.
After the vet left and Nico passed out on the kitchen banquette and Aria padded upstairs, Sienna started to put away the spice rack. She reached up to slide the saffron back into place, and her fingertips brushed something taped under the shelf. She felt the shape before she saw it. Cold metal, squared grip, trigger guard. She lifted the saffron jar. Bundled behind it, taped with surgical tape, was a brick of $100 bills 2 inches thick, and behind that, a matte black Glock 19. Sienna stood very still in the silent kitchen. Then she put the saffron back exactly where it had been. Sienna told no one. She did not call her brother. She did not pack a bag. She went to bed in her staff suite and lay awake until 4 a.m., listening to the rain on the slate roof. And at 4:30, she got up and started making congee. Not the Cantonese congee she had learned at school, the Sicilian version her grandmother had taught her. Short grain rice, simmered 4 hours in fumetto, made from the sea bream bones she had saved from the tasting menu. Finished with hand-pulled crab meat, white pepper, a single slick of green olive oil pressed 3 valleys from where her great-grandmother was buried. She did not know why she was making it. Then she heard the front door open at midnight on a Tuesday. Dante was supposed to be in Miami, and she did know. He came into the kitchen still in his coat, hair damp from rain, a bruise along his jaw that he hadn't bothered to hide.
Mrs. Carmela said you were still up.
I am.
He sat at the kitchen island the way a man sits down at the end of a 30-year war. She set the bowl in front of him without speaking. He looked down into it. Steam rose around his face. He picked up the spoon. He ate slowly, the way her grandfather had eaten the last meal of his life. At the bottom of the second bowl, he set the spoon down very carefully.
Sienna,
Yes.
who taught you to cook like that?
She told him about her grandmother, about Palermo, about the kitchen above her father's restaurant in Bensonhurst. Before her father, she stopped. Dante was watching her face.
Before your father what?
Died.
Dante's eyes went very still.
Tell me his name.
Don Lorenzo Valentini walked into his own kitchen at 6 a.m. on a Saturday in a cashmere robe, the color of dried blood. And when he saw the woman in chef whites kneading dough at his marble island, he stopped in the doorway like a man who had just seen a ghost wearing his dead sister's apron. "You must be Sienna." Don Valentini. He waved a hand. "Lorenzo, in this kitchen, Lorenzo. My wife tells me you cook like her mother. Your wife is being kind." "My wife has never been kind in her life." He smiled at his own joke. He took a stool. He watched her work. "You're making cusadati." "Yes. My mother made these every Christmas." The figs went through a hand-cranked grinder. The dough was mixed in a wooden bowl her father carved. "My grandmother's was a copper bowl, lined with tin." Lorenzo's eyes sharpened. "Where did your grandmother live before she came to this country?" "Palermo, Via Ballaro." He nodded slowly. He said nothing for a long time. Then, in Sicilian, to himself, almost a whisper, "Then you are not a stranger in this kitchen." Sienna kept rolling dough. Her hands did not shake. She had grown up hearing that dialect. She understood every word. Lorenzo did not know that. When Vivienne came in 20 minutes later to find her husband eating warm fig cookies with his fingers, he stood up and kissed her on the temple and said in English, "Get Dante on the phone. Tell him I want him at the house for Sunday lunch, with everyone, including the girl." He walked out. In Sicilian, on his way upstairs, half to himself, half to the patron saint of Palermo. "The girl knows what we are. She has not run." Sienna kneaded the dough. She did not look up.